Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to be talking about, my name's Hayley, and I'm joined by Ingrid. And we're going to be talking about teacher efficacy versus student engagement. So the things that teachers can be doing in order to up and promote engagement in their classrooms. I'm just going to start sharing my screen again. And top of the morning to everyone on this beautiful St. Patrick's Day. Sorry, bear with me for a second. Okay. I would firstly just like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri, the Ngunnawal, Gundungurra and Biripi peoples of Australia, who are the traditional custodians of the lands, skies and waterways on which Charles Sturt campuses are located. We'd also like to pay respect to their elders, past and present, and those emerging future elders. Okay, we're going to start by having just a quick introduction who we are. We're going to have a look at what we're going to be talking through and the theorists that we're going to be basing our presentation on. We're going to have a look at active learning versus passive learning and have a look at some research and evidence to support what we're saying. We're going to do an activity, and then we're going to have some concluding thoughts and words and a discussion afterwards. There's not a huge amount of people joining us, but I think we'll still be able to make it work really well. So thank you to those of us who have joined us this morning. Well, I'm Hayley. I have been a teacher in the public school system for the last 10 years. Engagement is something that is really dear to me because I was gifted the opportunity to lift literacy skills in year 7 and 8 students. And so as you can imagine, trying to engage teenagers in literacy skills was a task in itself. And I was so grateful for the opportunity because I learned so much about the results that you can get from actively engaging students. I'm going to hand over to Ingrid, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her background and then introduce us to the theorist.
Hi everyone, so my name's Ingrid. Thanks again for coming along today. It'll be great to hear your perspectives and your thoughts about this topic. Like Hayley, I'm an educational designer, also had a background in teaching. For a while I was teaching history and a little bit of economics, legal studies and English. I look forward to our PD today. If you have any questions or ideas, please feel free to speak up or use the chat box, and we can go through that as we go. But I'd love if today we could have a lot of conversation about this, because I think that really makes these PDs. So as we begin, our focus today is Diana Laureate. Diana Laureate introduced the conversational framework, which helps educators to think about what students have to do in order to understand something. So she really pushes for active learning and giving the student an opportunity to engage in the process. So this active learning and conversational framework supports the educator as acting as a facilitator in the process, creating a learning environment and providing ongoing feedback to help the learning progress. So in summary, her 6 learning types include the following. So the first one is acquisition, and this is the only passive learning type Laureate suggests, and that includes reading, watching and listening. That's the very traditional learning style that is familiar to a lot of people. The second learning type is inquiry, where a student comes up with the questions and involves in an evaluation and refines the search. So almost inquiry-based learning tasks. Collaboration, where students in collaboration produce a shared output. They provide peer feedback to create the best output that they can. That's the third learning type. The fourth learning type is practice, where the teacher sets up class goals or educator sets up class goals and generates an action and interprets the feedback. Then the student goes back thinking about the relevant concepts and tries again. Production, where the student produces something and they provide a presentation on what they've learned. That presentation can happen in a variety of different ways, which we'll talk about. and discussion, where students ask questions, they articulate their ideas, and they respond to the ideas. So as you can see, the green is all suggestions for active learning, and the red is the passive learning.
Okay, thanks, Ingrid. So what is active learning? What is passive learning? So as defined by the APA Dictionary of Psychology, passive learning is learning that occurs without active involvement. So as in drill or rote learning. Passive learning includes listening, watching, or reading in order to obtain information. So it's that very much there's no involvement, there's no student involvement in having to contribute or think about how they can synthesize that information. Active learning, on the other hand, we will have a look at now.
Active learning refers to a broad range of learner-centered teaching strategies to engage learners as active participants in their learning. This innovative approach is based on evidence from learning science. It explores how we can get more effective learning experiences by giving the learner opportunities to apply, analyze, and synthesize prior knowledge in order to create personal meaning. This can in turn lead to increased knowledge retention, a deeper learning experience, and improved learner outcomes. The educator's role in active learning is key as they make the shift from disseminator of information to facilitator of learning. This facilitation of learning can occur through questioning, discussion, and other structured active learning experiences that enable learners to listen, think, reflect, write, problem solve, and create, while getting clarification and guidance from the educator where needed. Examples of active learning experience include discussion, debate, group work, case studies, simulations, student presentations, team, problem, or project-based learning, and patient encounters, to name just a few.
Okay, everybody should be back on. Whoa, I don't think we need to watch it again. So I might close that one.
I am Judy Summers, and Ashley is our concierge for today.
Sorry, everyone, we've had some extra videos pop up. Everyone should be back on my screen now, which is the active learning versus passive learning. Can you just confirm this for me, please, Ingrid?
Yep, looking good.
Thank you. Okay. So we've, up until this point, and we are very conscious of this, we are passive learning. We are information giving to you. You're acquiring information through us discussing this with you and showing you a video. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the research before we get into some activities to really try and up the engagement and get you thinking about this on a deeper level as well. But why do we engage? So the research shows us that it works. Research done by Mallow and Less in 2013, and this is a direct quote from their findings. The combined data supports the hypothesis that the academic gains due to active learning are statistically significant, and there is more consistency in the overall performance of active learners. So what they did here, they had a control group. There was 817 students. They divided them up into a control group and an experiment group, and they applied active learning strategies through discussions. They had debates. They had a lot of peer communication in their active learning groups. However, in their control group, they delivered their material through traditional methods. So the acquisition, so that just the lectures, the videos, and the acquiring of knowledge through passive learning. And the findings of implementing the active learning strategies were that the pass rate was 50% for traditional or passive learning. I'm just going to skip to this one. For active learning, it was an 85% pass rate in the course. I think it was the arts. It was an arts degree. And on average, the test scores were 12.55% higher in the treatment groups. So in that study, they had significantly positive results through the application of active learning. Another research study conducted by D. Soloris in 2009 in tertiary physics education, very similar setup. They had the control group as well as the active learning group. And this is quite interesting, the findings of this, because as you can see on the graph to the left, while their test scores were higher, the actual attitude towards the active learning was lower. And this is quite significant because perhaps they weren't necessarily informed about what was going on. So for students to have that awareness, they can actually see why they're doing what they're doing, and it makes a difference to their overall attitudes to learning. But the statistics do show us that through the application of active learning, their test scores were higher. And the third piece of evidence I just want to share with you is research conducted by ASIC and Yelkin in 2018, and they used a flipped classroom strategy. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of a flipped classroom strategy, but essentially it's where the acquisition of learning is done at home. So the listening, the watching, all of those traditional methods is done in students' own time. And when they have time with their teacher face to face is when they engage in those active learning activities, where they can be put into small groups, or they can practice debating, or whatever method is deemed fit for the activity. And the research that come out of that, this is teaching English, English as a second language. And they again use the control group and instructed. One was with the flipped classroom, one was with the traditional methods. And again, they found that through pre-test and post-test data, the post-test scores in the active learning group were again significantly higher. And that's across the board, that the active learning just, it tends to get better results from their students. Okay. We're just going to hand out a resource now. Does anyone have anything to contribute at this point? Any ideas or thoughts? Feel free to come off mute, put your video on, share with us what you have, if you have any thoughts so far about what we've mentioned about the research. Okay.
So in the chat box right now is a document. Please feel free to open that document. It can be used for the future activities that we're doing for the rest of this PD. So it should be there for everyone to see now. So the activity that we're focusing on to start with is an activity where we're thinking about what the student is doing, the active learning. So as I mentioned, the resource is just in the chat. Please feel free to open that resource. What we're going to be doing is in breakout rooms. I'd like us to discuss what we've previously done as an educator to involve students in active learning. And depending on your subject, you may have done it in different ways. But using this resource document, it may help remind you of what you have previously done and or what you might be thinking about at the moment. So Haley's going to break us into breakout groups. Please come back with a couple of examples about how the people in your group have already implemented active learning and the thoughts about that process itself. Before we go into breakout groups, do we have any questions? Okay, so we're coming back with examples of active learning that we've previously done. Thanks, Haley.
And do feel free to contribute. We're all friends here. It'll be fine. Just let us know what your thoughts are and if you can contribute. Okay. How many of us are there, Ingrid? It just wants to know how many breaks.
Sorry, I'm just counting.
Numbers are going down. People worry about breakout rooms.
I think maybe 2 groups might be, or 2 or 3 groups might be the right amount. 2, yeah, maybe 3 groups.
3, okay.
It's interesting that even we don't like breakout rooms. By effort, and that's what the student doesn't like, because it requires that effort anyway.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, that going back to that research where
exactly,
yeah, the result happens with the active learning, but it's also that convincing students the benefit of it.
And Ingrid, it is sending you to a breakout group as well. Is
Sure.
that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, I'll see everybody soon. Is everything okay, machine?
We're back.
Yes, I'm just waiting for this 3 more to come back through. I'm just waiting. They must be deep in conversation and highly engaged in this. So
you could close the room, can't you? It gives 59 seconds to wrap up.
I did, yeah. That's right.
Yeah, we had a good chat.
Excellent. Okay, so from each group, could I have a volunteer, please?
I'm happy to speak.
Oh, sorry, Ingrid.
Oh, sorry, you go, Marissa.
No, I was actually going to dob Adrian in because he told me about it. I was just talked about Mentimeter, which was, I think pretty sort of staid and straightforward. But Adrian had an awesome activity that he does with his students.
Oh, look, I think.
Sorry, Adrian.
Marissa's being modest. Marissa's at the point where she practices Mentimeter, where I've only actually used it myself. So what she's come up with is great in terms of rating subjects, especially subjects that you don't know. sorry, when it's not a clear-cut answer. So Mentimeter is great when you've got forms of views and you can see them evolving. The thing I spoke to Marissa was about, I teach policing and stuff, and one of them was I gave them a real, based on a real life crime scene of an abduction of a mum that I was involved in the investigation. And so it's photographs taken from my mother-in-law's driveway, and because obviously you've got to protect the confidentiality of the case, but so the photographs involved different props I'd put up the driveway to simulate this alleyway, so such as a jogger shoe with the tongue pulled back but the lace still done up, a purse opened with money missing but other things left there, a small image of a CCTV, a picture of the house but the CCTV in the corner. So it was pretty straightforward, but I think what drew their attention was the fact that A, it was a real case, and B, they had to then investigate. And Marissa and I were talking about the fact that whichever discipline we're in, the investigation bit seems to sort of grab, in my view, sort of grabs their attention, whatever subject it is, and they have to go and find things and find clues and stuff like that. So that went down well. I thought I'd teach it face to face, which is obviously different, because they walk into the crime scene. But in this case, they had to just look at a slide deck. I thought it'd fall flat on its feet, but I couldn't shut them up. I couldn't stop the enthusiasm of trying to investigate this particular matter. So that's what we talked about, and also Mentimeter. So I don't want to do any misgestures to Marissa. That was also good as well.
Excellent, well done.
What inspired you to think of that case study? Was it just one that they were particularly focusing on, and that's where you got it from, or?
What was the first part of the question? Sorry.
What inspired that case study? Was there a particular topic that you were focusing on in policing, or?
Yes, thanks, Ingrid. No, good question. So that was about managing crime scenes. So the first people at the scene, what do we interpret when we get there, and what we sort of do and don't do in terms of the rules around it.
Yeah, okay.
So that's sort of that was the link back. So instead of, like I say, we had a video done of a mock one, I tried to sort of use this as a real life, and they paid a lot of attention to it. We'll see this year. We're doing it again for 3.0. Next Monday, I'll let you know if it works again.
Excellent.
But yeah, very, very basic,
Yeah, on that, it makes me think of because that's a brilliant way to engage students if they're in person as well, because they're also they're using the concepts and they're adapting to the scenario that they're given. But I also think as well, potentially there could be options online to do something like this as well, even something basic like PowerPoint. You can set PowerPoint buttons up, so you can almost give them a choose your own adventure style piece where you could have a scenario and the decisions impact the route that they go on. And that's actually, it's not too tricky to set up on PowerPoint. If you set a button on PowerPoint and you link the button.
okay.
That's a way, maybe that could be also translated to an online platform, because I love that. I think case studies they're so much fun, and I think students are talking about them from weeks on. But yeah, there's also that online opportunity to do it too. And you could also set up small videos throughout the PowerPoint that could also give that case study, the story behind the case study, and the text could come in with those linked buttons. Has anyone here done that before with PowerPoint? Oh, okay. Well, that's just one idea that made me think of, but
just on that though, Ingrid, I think, because with the face-to-face one, I actually have the real exhibits from the photographs actually on the desk for them to talk about. So I think what you're saying is to try and then use something that jumps out of the PowerPoint to sort of further analyze, if you like, make it more dynamic. So in the classroom, they'll have the prop on the table, with the forensic bag, and then they have to talk about it. So I have to try and assimilate something back in the PowerPoint. I might pick your brain at some point, Ingrid. Now I've got your name.
Yeah, welcome to. But yeah, no, definitely. I think it is tricky with PowerPoint. You can't get the student feedback from it, which is it's a bit tricky unless you did something as well as that. But giving the students different pathways they could go on in response to that object. Maybe they could do something with the object. They could think the object relates to something else. I'm not sure about policing, sorry, but
no, but it's about the teaching, isn't it? So yeah, whatever subject it is. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
I just think often we think of PowerPoints as being lineal rather than it could lead to multiple directions of the story for a student. But yeah, no, I love that. Did you get some interesting questions or from students as they went?
Continuously, because the first slide just tells them that the report person hasn't turned up for work. You know, mother of 5, she hasn't turned up for work, highly unusual. Her car's in situ in the CBD, she hasn't turned up for work. So that's basically what it was.
Yeah, right. And then so it immediately puts them in that pressure situation which they have to respond.
Yeah, and of course what happens as well is we start to creep in things around bias and stuff like that to see about how we assess it. We're full of Davises today. I see someone's put an awesome question up there.
Yeah, Jessamy, Ingrid Jessamy just asked if you have an example of that sort of that way that PowerPoint has been used.
Yeah, for sure. If you like, what I can do is I might add my email to the chat box, and if you'd like, at some point I can go through an example that I made ages ago, and I can just step by step show you how to go through it. Unfortunately, it's because it's a PowerPoint, it's not really a CSU technology, but I'm more than happy to show anyone if they want to do a Zoom meeting with me at some point. Anyway, I'll pop that in the chat now, and feel free to email.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Jessamy, did you want to share what you were talking with Emily about?
Yeah, sure. So I was saying to Emily, I feel it's somewhat of an advantage because I'm a teacher. So teaching, I use a lot of the strategies that we know work for teaching with teaching tertiary students. So, and I teach on campus and online, and obviously the strategies are different. On campus though, we do a lot of group work, and so I talked about using the jigsaw technique where I'll introduce a task, break the students into groups, and they work on either the task as a whole or a part of the task, and then they come back together and share. I will try and get them doing things, up and moving and doing things as much as possible. So for example, this week I was teaching them about using the environment, the physical environment outside, to teach young children about science. So we actually went for a walk around the beautiful wetlands at the Thaguna campus at CSU, and they were interacting with, you know, and seeing and touching and feeling things that they could then incorporate in their teaching. I asked them to bring things in to the classroom so that as prompts that we can talk about the learning opportunities for those sorts of things. I try and use a fair bit of technology. So I know Adrian was talking about Mentimeter. I don't have a great deal of confidence with Mentimeter yet, but I do use Padlet, Kahoot. So, you know, quite a few online platforms in different ways for different purposes too.
Fabulous.
Yeah,
that's excellent. And you're right, from a teaching background, you obviously have that experience to know how to coordinate and implement those things. And I do sort of feel for the people who haven't spent 4 years at university learning how to engage people.
Yeah.
It would be a struggle.
But I was saying to Emily in the group, you know, teaching predominantly online for last year and the year before really challenged my teaching strategies because a lot of the things didn't work. And for example, I use breakout rooms a lot in Zoom because I wanted to do group work, but I found, you know, you break the students into groups and, you know, you'll get ones that don't participate. And it's difficult to sort of force them. I was saying to Emily, in the classroom, if you notice that happening, you can do subtle things like walk over to that group and simply stand there and just listen to their conversations. And that sort of puts this gentle pressure on them that you can see who's contributing and who's not, whereas online you can't do that. So I was able to circumvent that to some extent by often assigning them roles. So when you do group work, you can give them, you know, somebody's a scribe, somebody's a researcher, somebody's the reporter, and that each week I would shift those roles around. So they had to participate, and then each week they also were asked to do different things. As well as mixing the groups up too.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. No, that all sounds very positive. And just, is there anything, Elizabeth or Marissa or Kim, is there anything that you wanted to share in terms of how you've incorporated active learning into your classrooms?
I'm sorry I don't have my camera on this morning. I'm doing the passive learning thing, but I'm not feeling particularly well and I don't want to inflict my runny nose on everybody. So both Liz and I teach purely online, and your observations, Jessamy, are absolutely right. What works face-to-face with students is very different in an online context. And I think, Liz, you could speak for yourself, but she teaches Chinese cohorts, which again, there's cultural elements as well. And it's very, very difficult. We were commenting, the challenge with online cohorts is that the message that comes from university, from the marketing and the enrolment process, is you can engage at any time you want to. It's flexible, it fits your life. And that's our cohort. They're mature age working people with children and jobs. And so we have no requirement that they turn up to tutorials. They can watch the recordings later on. And that highly hinders your ability to implement active learning in the online space. So you have to work really hard to engage them. And often we were talking about, it's by ambush, strangely enough, because if you set tasks ahead of time and say, this is what we want you to do in preparation for the tutor, they just won't come. So you're better off to actually throw it at them when they get in there and say, okay, this is what we're doing, and I'm putting you into breakout rooms. And we're working on this Google document while we're doing it. And then we're going to come back and we're going to regroup and discuss that. And that I find works a lot better, and using Google Jamboard as well to actually boost the interaction between them, to shift them from that passive to the active learning. But it's very, very different in the online space. And I think sometimes I feel like we are fighting against a message that you can just tap in and tap out when you want to. And that's hard.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree, Kim. Everything you said is basically our experience too. Yeah, so we use a flipped classroom approach basically in an online way. So we have lots of different sort of bite-sized sort of learning strategy, videos and activities and things that they can engage with. Sort of, we've tried to make them that they can engage with them as flexibly as they want to, and with that sort of marketing sort of message in mind. The other thing, I listened to a podcast earlier in the year, and it was an American guy, and he was talking about, I'm not going to remember the actual platform, Yellow Dig, I think, and it's sort of like Facebook in that they can have they can chat about certain topics. And the premise was that he would post a question or something that relating to that week's material for people to discuss online asynchronously, so they could have the chance to engage with each other that way. And then he would pick it up in the tutorial and talk about points that had been raised in that discussion in that next week's tutorial. So that's what I'm trying this session. With both of my subjects, not with Yellow Dig. I'm just using discussion boards because I figure they sort of know those. But all I'm doing is basically saying, I'm basically saying each week, what did you already know in this material? What was new? What was interesting? Do you have any questions? And it's working okay so far. And then I've just chatted about it in the tutorial, and then it sort of sparked off a little bit more conversations. So, but I agree, it's really hard. I think some students just will never engage. They're doing it, and for probably, as a single mum who works full time and trying to juggle all of those, I've got a school age child and all that stuff that you're trying to juggle. I get it, I really get it. But yeah, it does make it a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. There are limitations.
I like what you said there, Marissa, about also just trying to, as much as possible, I guess it's not easy, but as much as possible, as you said, a flipped classroom approach where I guess they can involve in active learning when they have the time. Because as you said, there's especially at CSU, the majority of students aren't school leaver students. They are students that are coming from, they're working, they're doing other things. So yeah, I guess the there's a lot of temptation as well with active learning while you're there in virtually in that space where you have time with them. But I guess if there's ways to do active learning, hopefully in their own time. But
the other platform to look into if you're interested in having a go, I tend to set myself a goal every session to try something new, because I can't do more than one thing new a session because I just don't have the cognitive load for it. But anyway, it just challenges me at least. I tried H5P a few years ago, and that's got lots of different interactive sort of things like quizzes and, you know, sort of whiz bang sort of slide decks and things like that you can play with. And they're the sort of things that we try and include to help those students who can't come to online tutorials to have some engagement, to get some feedback on what they're learning. And, you know, we use the quizzes a lot and things like that in our R2 materials. So yeah, I think you just do what you can.
Yeah. And I think students do appreciate that as well. And I recently was working with an academic, and she would do things like get students to make a LinkedIn board, or doing things that the student could currently use in their workplace as an active learning experience. And I think that's the tricky thing. It's they do appreciate it, but it's also they are often short on time, and if they can see the value in what they're doing, I think that helps sometimes. Which I think they would have seen that with those activities.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, I'm just looking at the time. We might just keep moving on if that's okay. It's fabulous to hear so much contribution. But we will just move on. If my screen wants to catch up. Okay. So looking at the handout that we gave you, that's essentially a cheat sheet. It has got lists of activities that you can do under the different headings. And we want you to use that now and apply it to a case study. So you have, sorry, I've just got that noise happening again. It's very strange. I'm not sure if anybody else can hear. There's just a funny noise. Okay, that's all right. Okay, you have a group of disengaged first year students. So this is highly applicable to a few of you. One student mentioned in passing that they struggle to understand content simply from reading. However, they do enjoy activities relating to real-world application, discussion, and understanding how the study they are undertaking will help them in their chosen profession. We're going to go back to different groups. We're not going to go to the same, I don't think. And what I would like you to do, we might just create one activity. We did have two, but just time-wise, I think we're going to develop one learning activity for your disengaged first-year students. It's very broad, so you can choose anything off the sheet that you would like to. And I know that it is very specific to each topic what you choose to do, but I'm hoping that you can sort of separate the learning activity and focus more on the engagement of it at this point.
Sorry, Hayley, I have to bail because I've got an online lecture at 11.
No problems at all. That's absolutely fine.
I need to do it, but great meeting everybody. And I think the key is just that we just keep doing different things and evolving, don't we, each time?
Absolutely.
You know,
right. Trial and error.
Great tips. I've been typing away. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See you later.
Okay, well, with only the few of us, I think, Ingrid, do you agree we might just stay together then? There is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That sounds like a plan. I mean, the resource we've given you, I guess, we're not saying it'll have to be personalized to the subject. I guess there's no way we could say it's just not one size fits all. If we could say an example for collaborative activity for a legal subject as opposed to an IT subject, it just doesn't really work that way. But we hope with this document, it just gives a scaffold of examples that could be leaned on. So if everyone wants to just go ahead and if they have access to Google, just write an example or two how you personalize that to a subject if you had a disengaged student in first year. So that is, the link is just in the chat box.
So yeah, something
Thanks,
that,
everyone.
something you would do to engage, an activity or a method of engaging. Let us know your thoughts. Let's have a look at the Jamboard.
After this exercise, we've also got a few more resources to pass on as well. So hopefully you'll find that useful.
Oh, that's a shame, Elizabeth, that it's not accessible in China. Yeah.
It's all right. I'm always looking at different programs and platforms, and I always do have that challenge that a lot's not accessible in China. So once I find one that works, I go with it.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I always check of, you know, what's available and what's not. So
yeah, and that's all you can do. You just, as Adrian said, just keep trying different things. And
yeah.
Okay, let's have a look. How is it going? Okay, probably start with something fun. Yeah, absolutely. Right, questions for each other. Oh, well done. Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Whoever wrote this first one here, fabulous.
That was me, and I actually stole it from another colleague. they've done the weakest link.
That's okay.
I haven't actually done it. It was just it just popped into my head. I thought I must try that. So they did the weakest link. I'd have to rewatch the show to remember how it works, but but something like that, you know, and getting them to write the questions helps them to engage in the content, but then, you know, trying to sort of catch each other out is a bit of fun too.
Absolutely. Create a rolling assessment task that requires application of the concepts. For example, we work a case throughout one subject. Okay, yeah, very good. I'm guessing that might have been Elizabeth, that one. No,
it was me. So law students sometimes get in this boat where they say there's huge volumes of reading and they can't relate it because they've never actually seen it in context. And it's our job, I think, to put things in context for them. So I teach one subject that is incredibly boring in terms of its reading. It's rules, procedures, forms. It's mind-numbingly boring. And yet, actually, it's a critical subject because it's how you litigate in court. So what I did was I threw the whole assessment regime out and I basically created a mock case. And so we are running a case from the beginning of the subject to the end. And every week we are explicitly spending half of the tutorial talking about our case and how we're going to outmaneuver our opponent using the rules, the forms, the procedures that they have to learn about that week. And so I've got a lot more assessments than you'd normally have in a subject, but they're small bite-sized chunks so that they are learning each week specifically towards assessment and specifically applying the content. And it was an absolute game changer for me in that subject.
yeah,
That's
well
brilliant.
done. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Do they come with do they have to prepare any documents, or do they have to in that process?
They do. They do. So they're actually preparing profession artifacts, basically. So they have a file. They're preparing file notes like a solicitor would. They're going to prepare the originating process, which is how we litigate in the court. They're going to draft the pleadings. They're going to actually make an oral application to the court during the process as well. So we're simulating as much as I can what happens in cases, and things are going to go wrong like they always do in cases. And they're going to have to adapt to that. They're going to have to find the rules that deal with that on a weekly progressive basis. So yeah, it's made a very boring subject a lot more palatable for some of them. And interestingly enough, gosh, it leveraged the tutorial attendance. When you tell them I'm spending half of the time talking about your assessment, they turn up.
Tricky.
Yeah.
Very good. Very
I'm
good.
just thinking maybe a parallel for that, maybe for an online cohort. There maybe are examples of, and depends on how you want to use it, but there are examples where students can record themselves and they're speaking, and they can also record their feedback. Maybe that would be good. They could also attach recordings or pictures or examples of their documents as well. But yeah, no, that sounds brilliant. And it sounds like they'll be able to keep that and use it later on too, which I think is a big win for students.
Yeah, it's worked really well. But another thing that really helps is I can pull down documents from the federal court website from high profile cases. So the Ben Roberts-Smith defamation trial, I can access the court file there, as can anybody. The Christian Porter defamation trial last year, we were pulling it down. So we could actually pull down live case material and say, this is what this looks like. This is why you need to know how to do this. And that can be a game changer for students too. If you can actually ground your concepts in something going on outside in the real world, they'll relate the boring material to what's going on.
Yes, you're exactly right there, Kim. That's what I was aiming at in terms of the application to the real world and how the chosen profession, what you're talking about, actually directly relates to the real world, and the content you're talking about can be applied, and that's exactly what I was sort of trying to facilitate in this session. So okay, the last thing is I might ask students to act out a scenario with various roles and then have the audience comment and reflect. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful, that role play and engaging in different roles. Well done. Maybe Jessamy.
Yeah, nice. That reminds me of an academic which I was speaking to a while ago, and she was saying with her business subject, she got students to think of a case study of there were stakeholders in a business, and they had to act out that process as maybe a similar example to what you're saying, Jessamy.
Okay, we might move on. Ingrid, we've got 3 minutes.
We can pass through this one, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've just got a few resources that I'm just going to pop in the chat box for you. I hope you find them useful. This comes from the Texa site, and I just cherry picked a few which I thought might be helpful. One doesn't fit everything, but hopefully there'll be something that is effective for your subject, for your students, and how you like teaching. So there's a few links that, yeah, hope you find them useful.
Okay, and we just wanted to recap really quickly that although this method is mostly acquisition, we did really try to implement 4 of the 6 learning types that we were talking about. So we discussed, we collaborated with the case study, we practiced, and we also the acquisition side. So we tried to model as best we could what we wanted to learn. So we also just wanted to let you know that research supports active learning, and yes, it is really hard in the online platform, but be confident to try new things. And I will give you permission now to try and be confident in your thoughts and know and back yourself. Back the idea that if you want to try something, you can, and it's not the end of the world if it doesn't work out. That's how we learn, and that's how we become better teachers. And also the DLT is here to help. So if there is anything that we can do to help you, then please get in touch. And I think we've done quite a lot of discussing and collaborating. So this was just an open space again, but I think that brings us to the end with 1 minute to go. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we wish you all the best with your active learning and engaging learners, and enjoy this session and the sessions after.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you for all your suggestions and ideas. It's great to hear what you're doing, and it sounds like you're doing a fantastic job. And hopefully, just by having a collaboration of academics all together, sharing ideas and thinking of different ways we could do things, it just adds to what we're already doing. So thanks for sharing, and I hope that you found this helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you both for facilitating it. It's always great. Like I said, I've got probably like the others, I've got a list of things that I can investigate and have a play with. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
No problems.
Yeah.
Please use the cheat sheet. Use it. It's just a list of things that you can do. So go ahead.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.